who I am. I'm Andra Annette, and this is Lorilet Monegro. And together we are Soul's Code. So last we were talking with you guys. We had been talking about all the technology that's out there and the impacts that it might have on future generations, how quickly it's moving, and how that might not always be such a good thing because it is making people obsolete, like Laura had mentioned, and it's also sensory overload. So it is having an impact on our nervous systems and our lives on a day-to-day basis, right? So you buy a phone today and tomorrow there's
It's
you
gone.
got the 14, tomorrow there's a 16, 17, 18, right? So
Yeah.
it is having an impact, and in the race to get ahead, I guess, in evolution, and we're not really doing ourselves as many favors as we are. So yes, it's great that we have all these assistants. They have all these different types of AIs and stuff like that. But pretty much they can replace a lot of different job roles and so much more. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. If we don't become equipped to be able to cultivate ourselves in terms of knowledge base and in terms of having creative ideas and strengthening all those things that make us human. I mean, now more than ever is the time to really differentiate ourselves from robots, right? It's this aspect that we are human beings and have blood running through our veins, and we have warmth, and we have passions, and we have desires and emotions and all kinds of things. And I think that now is the time to really tap into all of that inner knowing. And if anything, technology can disrupt us also spiritually, right? When you think about the fact that if we decide to take this as an opportunity for growth, then we can actually begin to tap into deeper knowing of ourselves as opposed to having technology become a blockage to our growth because we are the ones who've created technology. Now, if we fail to do that, to tap into our inner essence, I do think that technology in many different ways can actually become pretty destructive. So there has to be an evolution of our humanity through this process. I just think that it may happen quite fast if we are not sophisticated enough to work with ourselves, right? Because in the hierarchy of needs, think about how we have this need for belonging, this concept of, having this sense of significance and meaning and self-actualization. That all ties into love and being able to feel that you are having a fulfilled life, right? And if technology comes in and let's say it robs you of something that probably potentially gives you a sense of meaning and being, I think that that's when a big question of existence, your existential questions may come in. And that could very well turn into something amazing if we use it for a good thing, or it could be very detrimental if we become limited, fixed, closed minded. If we come into a loop, oh, I'm worthless, or I don't have anything to do, or I've lost my job, or I am a nobody, or I'm a whatever, right? Because it
But there's
depends
also
how this
there's
goes.
there's also socialization in and of itself is very healthy.
Absolutely.
We need that connection to other people. So
Yes.
I feel like because there's so much technology, that people are spending so much time on
Mhm.
technology that they're not getting outside, they're not having those connections, they're
Right.
not interacting with people. Children are on their phones, they're on the computers, they're doing
Hmm.
everything, but they're not having those one-to-one conversations.
Hmm.
So I feel like they're a distraction in that way. And it
Absolutely.
I don't feel like people can say that their life has no meaning because technology does bring a lot of advantages, but you have to be willing to grow and take the time to learn. those advantages. I mean, um, when nurses first went to electronic records, right?
Mm,
When the healthcare system, most
mhm,
nurses that were working, at least where I was, didn't even know how to turn on a computer, and they were like, "What?" You know. I mean, it was very comical. So, I remember that day where when the med nurse was going down the hall with her cart, and the supervisor was trailing along with her, and they were doing it together because they never did it before, right?
mhm,
But it was very comical. He was trying to help her, she was trying to learn the system, but it but at the same time, there was that connection. They were
mhm,
doing it together, right? So if we move forward with technology as a civilization, and and I think the online space, to some extent, does help people do that, because there are people out there teaching people all these new tools, right? People are
mhm,
teaching people AI, people are teaching people different webinar sessions and stuff, but it's become more of a financial thing for people than to really help, right? So I mean, everything has its good and everything has its bad, but we were talking on the last show about evolving. So if people aren't willing to grow, adapt, evolve, they will be left behind,
mhm,
because technology and these
mhm.
companies that make them, the humans, are not going to stop for Mary Jo and Bobby to catch up. They're just
Right.
not. They're just not. So, but we do, like you said in the last show, have to decide how much of that we're going to let in and when we're
Mhm,
going to close it down, because it's not good for our nervous system to always be on either, to always
mhm,
be stimulated. We do need to
mhm,
shut down our bodies. I mean,
mhm,
night and day happen for a reason, right? There's a
mhm,
time to be awake and there's a time to be asleep, right?
mhm,
Um, and your cortisol levels are different. They're higher in the morning and
mhm,
lower at night. But if you're always on, then you're forcing your body to be on and your cortisol levels to remain up. It's like the person who exercises at night, they're increasing their cortisol when it's trying to slow down. So um, these these things can have good impacts on society and they can have bad impacts on society, but people do have to determine what's important to them, what's going on in them, right? And what how they're going to move forward, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think that you know, the issue is whether we will have a growth mindset, right? An open mindset, or we're going to be closed-minded and fixed. And, what I said before, I want to clarify is that if a person has a closed mindset and they feel that you mentioned that the jobs will be replaced, many jobs could be replaced. And I said, yeah, the issue is those people who don't integrate will suffer the consequences. And some people may have a very closed mindset where they feel that because they've lost their job, they lost everything. Not everyone is going to be, oh, I'm so whatever, let me reinvent myself. Not everybody is open and willing to embrace the challenge, because it is a challenge, right? To start accepting the unfamiliar, or to start reinventing yourself so often because of the fact that technology makes things obsolete. Technology is going at a fast, fast pace that the human brain simply cannot meet it. It cannot. And we have to now start realizing that from here forward is a new society that requires the integration of artificial intelligence. We cannot unknow what we already know, right? It's like going to higher education. Once your brain has been disrupted by higher education, you cannot go back and piece it back together. Let me pretend I never went. It doesn't happen. And so this is a moment in time. It's a very specific wake up time. And the awakening can happen on multiple layers. And this is where I was going before, where this technology could become either the hamper or the amplifier of your spiritual practices, your inner knowing, your open-mindedness, your willingness to embrace your bigger self, your higher purpose. Why? Because if your basic world purpose is taken away from you, let's say by this AI, you need to now tap into a higher level self to be able to know that you're bigger than the AI. And if we cannot stand on that basic understanding that human and humanity and lives and our lives are bigger than any of these tools, then we will lose our way. And instead of it being something that support us, it'll be something that begins to self-destroy us. And so we have to start really taking this serious, because I can only imagine if this is AI now in its initial stages, it hasn't been out for our particular consumption. I doubt that it wasn't already out and not known to the masses for many years. Okay. I think that when it reaches us, the masses, is because it's been tested for at least a decade. So I think AI has been around for woof, who knows how long. Okay.
Absolutely.
But what's going to happen, meaning because we're always behind, the masses are behind, and we think this is octane. I have a feeling there's a bigger monster of an AI that already exists. And we have an inkling when we look at crypto, when we look at all of these different things that we see already showing up, and we have no idea what's behind that. Well, imagine what's behind that has to be really bigger and bolder than what we are seeing. And this is why I'm saying people need to brace themselves. It's not to be scared, but we do need to come to the realization we're not going back to this idea that technology and AI didn't happen. It's not happening, people. So whoever's listening, I am telling you, it's not happening, people. So we only have one choice, and that is to go forward, because it's not happening, people.
There's
AI is
still
not shutting down.
it's not shutting down, but it does need to be fed. You know what I mean? It doesn't just spit out answers.
Right,
You do need to feed it, you know.
exactly.
Um, However, they are teaching it to mimic people and clone people, like like you see people, well, you see clones of people. So that they have apps that clone your voice and do all these things.
Which I don't
So
think it's logical to do. I think that's
I
weird.
I just think that's going to give people an easier way to defraud people. That's how I feel. I
Well,
think there'll be a lot more scams around that. I think there'll be a lot more
well, hopefully they put serious controls in terms of how that's used, right? Where there
listen, they
has to
just
be
they
some.
just broke into the network here in Riverdale. They just got into the school system here in Riverdale. They got into the parents, everyone's files, their bank statements, all this stuff, and they were laughing about it very publicly, right? And they put all that private information out there on the web.
Well, but
Hackers.
that's what I'm saying, all that stuff should be supported by authentication, higher authentication, like
Should be.
that has
It
to be
wasn't.
something that whoever is at the back end of creating all of these things, including the AI and all that, they need to be intelligent about that before rolling out things that they know have a very potential negative effect, and it is their responsibility. Why? Because they're the creators of it, right? You cannot go around creating monsters and then not know what's the antidote to stop them. And I think that that's where regulation of how you put out something, meaning make sure that before you put it out, you authenticate how people can create these things, right? Like it shouldn't be any random person can go ahead and go around creating automated creations of another person and clone them. That should be totally illegal. Totally.
No, they
Because
can.
that's like identity theft, right?
No,
There should be
that's
like
not what I'm
serious.
saying. There are apps that allow you to clone yourself. So if you can clone yourself, then you can clone other people. So, um, and identity theft happens pretty regular. So whether or not it's legal or not, If you can clone yourself with an AI app, what's to stop you from cloning someone else? So even though it should be regulated, there's lots of things that should be regulated here in America that haven't been regulated. And the people that have been, who have been the people that should have regulated it, did a really shitty job. So, um,
Right, but I'm gonna keep it to this conversation. I'm not trying to compare apples and oranges, even though they're both fruits. I'm talking about the fact that if these things are happening and then there's no regulation for it, it can potentially become a very destructive type of thing. So there has to be a type of regulation of how that is allowable, right? Kind of like the same way you have liquor licenses, you have X, Y, and Z, you have stipulations for things. So you can have parameters of how people are going to use all of this stuff, because
well, I mean, influencers are using it now. They're replicating themselves to get their more time, more money, and more freedom. So they're using these apps and they look like it's them, but they mimic, AI is mimicking their voice. So mimicking and cloning their facial features, right? So they sell this app to other influencers. So I know it's out there
scary.
because I've come across it already. So
I'm just saying it can be a pretty scary thing
it can be. So
if
I'm
it's
the
not controlled.
yeah, well, I mean, if influencers have it, it's not that controlled. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying
Well,
now.
it should be able to say right away, this is AI, it should say it. It should have something that has to be that way for them to use it. That's what I'm saying. That because there's no regulation, meaning there's no terms on how and conditions on how these things are used. That's what we're having that. And at some point, that's when regulation is going to step in because there's going to be some gross misuse. And somebody with the right amount of money and the right amount of influence is going to get hurt. And because it will hurt them, they will go ahead and create the conditions. We just have to wait until it gets to some really hoity-toity rich person that is bothered by it. Until then, all of us
We're
who have to
stuck.
go
We're
work,
stuck.
have to go work for a paycheck, will
So
have to
just
go
be
through.
careful out there, guys, and don't be afraid to learn new things or to experiment. It could be a hindrance, but it can also be an asset. It depends on how you're willing to use it and, whether or not you're willing to have an open mind instead of a fixed mindset, right? So I think we've covered a lot about technology and and we just wanted to pop in and say hello and share some time with you. So I hope you enjoyed this session of Soul's Code. I'm Andra Annette, and this is Lorilet Monegro. Have a good night.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.